Man, I gotta know more, friends. Let's watch the lore of the Elden Ring Eternal Cities.
I think everyone had this moment in Elden Ring. You find a building hidden in the forest of Lingrave's Mistwood, and the door mysteriously opens of its own
It was a hell of a
volition
moment.
to reveal an elevator down that just keeps going and going, on and on until you forget that you're even underground.
You know, yeah, okay. So he started this right off the bat with like, everyone had this moment, but I thought this moment was like super intriguing. Like how, you know, when you were like little and you were playing video games for the first time, and just like every game was sort of like magical. Like you probably have fond memories of your early games, right? But you kind of get used to that stuff over time. The fun whittles away, and it's just like you've seen it before. You know, it's not new. Going down this elevator was like one of those few times in recent memory where I was like, whoa, you know, like it really kind of blew me away how it kept going and going and going. And then you end up in this giant, like the map itself kept expanding, and like the game's crazy, you know, it's like so big. And then you go down here and it's just like this entire other world was amazing. It was a moment for sure.
The cavernous roof is now so far above that it might as well be a false night sky, and the world below has life, light, and a culture of its own. But what's interesting about the environment down here is that it's actually a fusion of cultures. There are the dynastic remains infested with claymen, and then there's the ancestral grounds brimming with wildlife. But built amidst it all,
I'd love to learn more
between the
about them.
ruins, beyond the ancestral grounds, and even hanging from the ceilings, are the incredible Eternal Cities, inhabited by the Nox.
The Eternal Cities, Nokron,
For now, think of
and
the Nox
Noxtella?
as just these enemies. The monks,
The
swordstresses,
Nox.
and
Nox means
maidens
night.
of the Eternal Cities. The word Nox means night in Latin.
Your boy
Some of
out
you might
here, come on, your boy out here knowing Latin. I didn't know it was Latin.
remember this from the phrase Verio Nox in Dark Souls, which was commonly held to mean fear the night. And this theme has carried over to Elden Ring, where fear and respect for the night is conveyed by characters like Rani, who seek to usher in an age of stars.
Here beginneth the chill night that encompasses all, reaching the great beyond.
Is Ronnie associated to the Eternal Cities?
And loneliness.
Night, she's, you know, night.
Just like the Age of Dark in Dark Souls, the coming Age of Stars is presented as a bit of an inevitability in Elden Ring. Or at least it might have been.
It's my
were it
favorite
not
ending.
for Star-Scourge Radahn.
I know it's kind of like, people always joke about like simping for Ronnie and all that junk, but like, it's a cool ending, and it's getting there is a fascinating, like going through all of that in game to get to it is pretty cool.
Who locked the stars out of motion and fettered
Leonard,
fate once
looking
writ
good,
in
bro.
the night sky on behalf of the Golden Order. Again, this is just like in Dark Souls, where the coming Age of Dark was stolen from mankind by a greater power. Yet, even now, the Age of Stars continues to be championed
beautiful
by
looking.
a people called the Nox. Except now, the Nox have been banished to the underground, and here they live in this state
they were
of
banished.
eternal anticipation, just endlessly waiting for a fate that has been taken away from them. We're never explicitly told which act it was that led to the Nox's banishment, but my best guess...
Hey, you know what I
which
just
act-
realized? In Bloodborne, there are like these stone dead people. I guess these could be like ashes or people that were like there for so long they're like corpses, but they kind of look like stone to me. In Bloodborne, there's a bunch of those wrapped around trees and stuff, and I never figured out what that actually meant in Bloodborne or here either.
act it was that led to the Nox's banishment, but my best guess is that it has to do with this, the Finger Slayer blade, which we loot beneath the giant's throne in Nokron. A part of its description reads, "This blood-drenched fetish is proof of the high treason committed by the Eternal City and symbolizes
High
its downfall."
treason.
So,
What high treason?
what was the nature of the Nox's high treason, then? Well, this is a Finger Slayer blade, one that is
Oh.
able to harm
Killed
the greater
a Two
will of
Fingers?
its vassals, This blade is drenched in blood and proof of high treason, so it seems
So
like the
somebody
weapon was successfully used.
destroyed
but
a
we
two
can
fingers. Didn't Ronnie cut like a two? She slayed her two fingers. At some point, she's like sitting there in front of it. It's all bleeding. Did she use this blade?
only really speculate on which pair of two fingers this blade might have been used on. Of course, it might have just been high treason to
So maybe any
create
of them.
this blade in the first place. This weapon is said to be born of a corpse, so
Yeah, you can see the
let's take
spine
a
in
closer
it.
look at
It looks
its
gross.
icon. Doing so reveals a spine running up the blade and two arms that form the hilt. So clearly this weapon is born of
Do
a
you
corpse,
hold the head?
but it's not the only weapon in game that's
Oh.
like this. Remember that moment at the end of the game where the Elden Beast reaches into the ground and pulls a sword from Radagon's corpse? That is the sacred relic
That
sword.
one's not so
And
obvious.
It too is a spined spiral
I guess it
blade
is there
with a human
at the
forming
hilt.
the hilt. So to some in this item's description, this weapon represents the end of an age, and to others, the beginning.
That's a pretty common, like, that's common in the game, or really in all FromSoft games. An end and a beginning, things moving on and changing throughout, through all the games. I think that's really interesting.
Now, I kind of doubt that the Finger Slayer blade is made from a corpse that's as powerful as Radagon, just because it seems so much smaller, broken, and limp. But regardless, it clearly was an attempt to bring about the end of one age and the beginning of another. Just so, the Finger Slayer blade can only be wielded by Rani, who needs the weapon to claim her fate and achieve her ending.
Okay, that's what I just said, right? Like, they said you can only speculate which two fingers was slain with the Finger Slayer blade. Was it not the one that Ronnie killed? Am I making this up? Ronnie killed her two fingers, or a two fingers, right?
But this can only happen when you defeat Radahn and unlock the fate in the night sky, because doing so sets free a star from the cosmos, which crashes into Limgrave, revealing the path to Nokron, the Eternal City, where the Finger Slayer blade lies hidden. There are multiple Eternal Cities that are spread widely across the lands
I know
between
two.
and located deep beneath the earth. First, we have the city of Nokron that lies beneath Limgrave.
And Noxtella. I don't know what the
entrance to
third
this
is.
city is torn open by Radahn's meteorite when we explore it, so all of the foremost buildings are ruined, but they form the path leading to this undisturbed, multi-layered city that's sort of tucked behind the dynastic remains and
So cool,
the
man.
ancestral environs that were built here long before. Then there's Nokron's twin, the city of Noxtella, which is located beneath Liurnia. I think most people would have got their first hint of this city when they wound up in the Ainsel River fighting the Dragonkin soldier of Noxtella.
Yeah.
But the true city is further up from here, stretching out between long sections of ant-infested tunnels. Here, the Nox have actually learned
those ants.
how to ride these ants. Though
Really cool,
the
though.
ants will happily turn on them if given the chance.
Oh, I never noticed that.
But there's a third city. A completely devastated, nameless city
Oh.
located beneath Lane-Dell, which is a place we'll have to talk about a little bit later in this video.
Okay.
These three cities just have incredible architecture. I love Nox.
I don't know. I don't know if that's one of the Eternal Cities. Okay, it probably is, but that surprises me.
These three cities just have incredible architecture. I love Nokron's massive inverted towers, and it's cool how Noxtella's shining city is built right into this low-hanging false night sky. Now, the game isn't really clear on whether these cities existed before the Nox's banishment
Fuck those
underground,
balls, too.
or if they were built afterwards. However, I'm inclined to think that they actually existed before their banishment. Take the Finger Slayer blade's description, for instance. This weapon is the most likely reason for the Nox's banishment, and it lays the high treason at the feet of the Eternal City. It doesn't blame the Nox, who would have existed above ground at some point. It blames the Eternal City. But
Okay, but that doesn't make any sense. Like, a city's not going to kill anybody. The inhabitants of the city, the Nox, are who's going to kill somebody. So blame the Nox, right?
Regardless, while they at least might have already had these well-developed cities down here, their banishment was still a brutal punishment, because the Nox would have been cut off from the true night sky, which was a core part of their culture. As some small comfort, I speculate that they created these false night skies, which are
Oh,
made of suspended white fragments.
okay.
This they accept as they wait for the Age of Stars to begin. In order to learn more about these cities, though, I'd like to look at some data mined information. Of course, you have to take this with a grain of salt, but in version 1.0 of Elden Ring, the Eternal City buildings are frequently listed as Marika's ruins, and the Eternal City pavilions are Marika's pavilions.
Okay.
What's more, the Nox themselves are actually called Marika's descendants. This obviously has pretty
Ah,
huge implications, so let's try to break down Marika's ancestry and see if we can arrive at the Nox. So, Marika herself is
she's a
of the
Newman.
Numen
Yeah.
race, who, according to the character creation screen, are supposed descendants of denizens of another world.
Another world. I guess I knew that because I've read this before, but I kind of forgot maybe. I just thought they were from like another land, like same planet, not the lands between though. Like the Newmen are from out east or whatever. I didn't realize from another world. That's really interesting. The Newmen are like aliens. It's pretty wild.
The only other supposed Numen in-game are the Black Knife Assassins, who, according to their silver armor, were all women and rumored to be Numen, who had close ties with Marika herself. And we have proof that these Numen Black Knives were tied to the Eternal Cities.
You ever notice how, like in this game in particular, that it's kind of even sad that I even have to like that it's even a talking point, but how women are well represented. So, like, go back 10 years and all years prior to that in video games. You know, go look up at like a character selection menu for Mortal Kombat, for example. It's going to be like 9 out of 10 characters are men, and because you know they're warriors and fighting and blah blah blah. But in this game, I'd say there are probably I don't know if there's more women, but like I found myself all the time like Littell the Headless is a woman, and all of the Black Knife Assassins are women, and Marika and all of the different like I don't know. There's characters everywhere. I well represented, nice even mix, and in some ways more powerful in a game, and I think that's great.
They say the assassins who carried out the deed were scions of the Eternal City.
So if we take Roger at his word, then it seems like Numen are indeed tied up with the genealogy of the Eternal
Look at those
City,
hands,
and
though.
that Marika herself is
Beast
likely
mode.
one of the Nox's ancestors. You could go as far as to say that Marika is actually from an Eternal City too. She is called the Eternal, after all. But again, remember this
Is that not because she is eternal?
We're not really supposed to know.
Yeah, I would think America the Eternal because she is eternal, maybe not because she is from an eternal city. But I could be wrong.
But at any rate, while the
I'm
Nox
probably
might be
wrong.
descended from the Numen, I think enough time has passed that most Nox aren't really considered Numen anymore. If anything, they're now more akin to the Night Folk, which is actually another descendancy you can choose for your Tarnished in the character creator. Night Folk and Nox share similarly hued skin, and Night Folk are a race that was said to bleed silver long ago. So let's finally actually talk about the Nox monks, the priestesses,
Bleed
the
silver,
Night
huh?
Maidens, and the silver.
Don't
that
the
they wield. The monks of the Eternal Cities are all men, and they fight
shoot,
with flowing weapons.
what are the names of the Albinurics? Aren't they like they I don't know if they bleed silver, but yeah, don't they bleed like a weird color?
Of liquid metal. So too do the Swordstresses, a female caste of the Nox who are agile warriors and serve as the personal guards of the Night Maidens. The Night Maidens themselves are said to be of the highest clerical rank, and it's definitely interesting that a group of maidens would be of the highest clerical rank. It's almost as if the Night Maidens exist as a sort of parallel to the Kindling Maidens of the Two Fingers, who serve the Tarnished so that they might become Lord. Because remember, a core part of the Nox culture is also about searching for a lord to serve. Except unlike the title Elden Lord, the Nox are waiting for a Lord of Night. In a way, this Lord of Night is
Ronnie?
almost an imitation of the Elden Lord, which would make sense because the Nox are extremely well versed in the art of imitation. So let's talk about that. I think I speak for a lot of us here when I say that a core part of so many of our late game playthroughs were the Mimic tier Spirit Ashes, which copied the form of their
It's true.
summoner. And from a lore point of
Yeah, I definitely the update where the Mimic tier got nerfed a little bit. I was like mid game when I played that, and I thought it was kick ass. Like I used the Mimic tier a lot.
view, the whole point of this
Also, no shame in my game. I for sure summon all the time.
Mimic tier is actually to mimic the Tarnished who might become the Elden Lord. Its description reads, Mimic tiers are a result of an attempt by the Eternal City to forge a lord.
Oh,
However, the description also says that their mimicry does not extend to imitating the summoner's will. This makes it seem like Mimic tiers are this tool,
Wow.
right? They're something to be used to achieve the Eternal City's ends. So it's important to point out here that Mimic tiers are actually more accurately Silver tiers, and Silver tiers literally are tools, because they're wielded by the Nox. as
Oh,
weapons.
okay. So I'm starting to see something here. Like they're weird weapons that they use and they stretch out and do weird shit, like the liquid metal T1000 stuff going on. So if they're making like T1000s and their weapons are T1000s, you got little blobs running around. They're all probably the same stuff. So they're out here keeping the Albinaurics in mind, right? Because aren't they created? But that's what they're doing. They take this silver liquid metal junk and they just make stuff out of it, which would be really cool to do.
The Nox flowing hammer and the Nox flowing sword are forged from the liquid metal of silver tiers and tempered to hardness. This gives them the ability to extend,
like that.
bend, and when wielded by the Nox, to drastically change their form into spiked shields and even giant hands. And what's kind of chilling to realize is that these weapons are actually living beings. This is all quite clearly inspired
Living
by
beings?
ancient alchemical conceptions of mercury or quicksilver.
Somebody in the comments on the last video, one of my recent reaction videos, started talking about alchemy like pretty in depth. And but I wasn't I'm not well versed. I'm still not. But I definitely, when I first read it, was not well versed in what alchemy was, other than like chemicals. Like I didn't even really know about the religious concepts and things like that. So I had gone and looked up alchemy, and there does seem to be gobs of reference to alchemy throughout the entire game, which is interesting. So maybe go like, I just checked out like a Wikipedia page and then kind of went down a rabbit hole a little bit there. But there's probably a ton of that stuff that you could find if you really were looking for it.
Which was this compound that was believed to be able to shift between liquid and solid states, as well as life and death. In-game, silver tiers are called formless life, able to be reborn again and again into imitation. They are as much a substance as they are a living organism, and we see this in their multitude of forms: silver spheres, trolls, and even nightfolk, to name but a few. There's even this entire cut questline that would have had you bond with a silver mimic tier called Asimi.
Oh.
In the cut dialogue files, this mimic tier claims to have grown a desire for life and knowledge and lordship, and she desires to share the throne with you.
That would have been a cool
You could have
quest line.
become Elden Lord, and I could have become Sovereign Eternal.
It could have been an entire like ending where you do it for the Eternal City. Although I'm still thinking Ronnie is like secretly a part of this. Maybe they cut it because it was too similar.
I think, and I know a lot of you guys did as well when I mentioned this last time, I think this would have gone a really long way towards making players relate to the story of the Nox, and it
Yeah.
would have made them
Don't know.
question the Order of the Erd Tree.
I don't really know anything about him.
And after learning about this questline, I can definitely see why mimic tiers and artificial life might have been this enormous threat to the Erd Tree's authority. The Nox were, after all, messing with these crucial things that the Erd Tree had come to govern. They were messing with the powers of life, death, and rebirth. Of course, we know that death was
They just
sacrosanct
built a
to the
troll.
Erd Tree during its age. As I discussed in my video on death, many ancient methods of death came to be abandoned or shunned in favor of returning to the Erd Tree's roots instead, through the
rebirth.
process of Erd Tree burial. All the old ways of death were abandoned. And as for rebirth, well, the Erd Tree is never really explicitly said to be able to rebirth beings. I think a lot of people just assume that it's implied, but
What do you mean assumed implied? Like we come back to life? That's I've talked about this too. The mechanic of the game is explained by Erd Tree burial and rebirth. Like that you come back to life. Everybody does. Like isn't that's okay, I guess it could be assumed, but it feels pretty obvious to me.
there is a bit of evidence. Many depictions of the Erd Tree actually show human forms growing along its branches, just as they show human forms being absorbed in death by its roots. And you can't forget that an entire great rune of the Elden Ring explicitly governs rebirth.
Another example.
This is Renala's Amber Egg, and inside it is the great rune of the Unborn.
In the end, Lady Renala was left alone, cradling the amber egg Lord Radagon bequeathed her. Now she devotes herself to it through forbidden rite, the grim art of reincarnation.
He's a tortoise.
I think Miriel calls Renala's reincarnation a grim act here, because reincarnation already has a bit of a history with the Nox in the Lands Between. And Renala isn't the Erd Tree, so I can see how what she's doing might be a bit sacrilegious. She's even capable of using larval tears from the Eternal City, so Miriel, speaking as any follower of the Erd Tree would, understandably decries Renala's rebirths as forbidden rites. And when I searched for this phrase, forbidden rites, in my dialogue spreadsheet, I stumbled upon cut dialogue from Thops, who confirms that forbidden rites like this did indeed originate in the Eternal City. I don't think it's a coincidence that forbidden rites is the same phrase used for Renala and by Thops as well.
Oh, one more thing. Beware the Albinorics. Accursed souls born of a forbidden right to the Eternal City.
I told you the Albinurics.
So,
defiled blood.
Albinorics
I put that one together.
To the ancient notions of artificial life, and that's something that's supported by the Albinoric blood clot description, which calls them life forms made by human hands.
Okay.
According to the Albinoric shield,
Human
Albinorics
hands?
are said to have been created from a primordial drop of dew, which to me evokes the Erd Tree's own imagery of dew, where drops of life dripped from the Erd Tree's branches. It's sort of imitation in that way to me. The ripple blade that is wielded by young Albinorics echoes this, stating that ripples are thought to be at the origin of their species.
Oh,
Obviously,
cool. What a cool design that it's water when you drop a drop in water or liquid it and it ripples out. I never saw it like that. That is clearly is it called the actual ripple blade? That's such a cool design.
That ripples are thought to be at the origin of their species. Obviously, these are all references to liquid, and it suggests that Albinorics are born of the same liquid silver that we just discussed. An older description of the blue silver set also confirms this, calling Albinorics children of silver. And there are a few different types of Albinoric that can be encountered in-game. There are first-generation
1.0 and 2.0.
have withered legs and are called the Albinorics of old.
I understand that the Albinoric 1.0, their legs don't work, but they also look more normal. Albinoric 2.0, yeah, they can walk, but they look ridiculous. I feel like maybe I'd rather walk. These guys can talk. The other ones seem stupid. They're like frog people. So I don't know if 2.0 is better.
And then there are second-generation Albinorics.
Yeah, look at these idiots.
Resemble frogs. And
smooth-brained, vomiting club idiots.
Let's discuss these first-generation Albinorics first. As far as enemy models go, there are the men, who are commonly the subject of torture and genocide. And then there are the women, who seem to have learned to defend themselves as
the women look pretty normal.
Wolfback archers. this is probably a good time to mention.
Yeah, they
this
ride
isn't
around
the
on
only
wolves.
Example in this video
It's cool as
where
shit.
The women of the culture are far more dexterous than the men.
Yep.
All of the Black Knives are women. The Nox swordstresses defend the Knight Maidens, who are of the highest rank. And if we're talking about rank,
that's what I was talking
then
about.
Karya and its princesses as well are a prime example of that.
Okay. I won't drone on about it, but that's exactly what I was saying earlier. Women are well represented in the game and in the storylines.
Speaking of Karya, actually, Pidia is an example of an Albinoric man that serves Karya, and other Albinoric men in Karya have clearly learned glintstone sorcery, not to mention Loretta, but maybe that's the story for another time.
Oh, that's why Loretta's on a
Moving
horse?
to the second generation Albinorics. As newer Albinorics in the lands between, the formula for these artificial humans seems to have been improved, as they now have legs, which they put to comically good use, although Thops in his cut dialogue does say that they've lost the use of their tongues.
Yeah, they can't even talk.
They really haven't got the formula quite right. There's something also going on with their heads, which From Software themselves call dumpy and frog-like. You can even loot the Albinoric mask, which is literally just their own face, skinned in an act of malicious mockery. And I really shouldn't laugh, but it is kind of funny, admittedly, that even Elden Ring players are also guilty of genociding helpless Albinorics. There's this site
up with the
in
blood
Morgwyn
ones?
Palace where it's just far and away the best way to farm runes, and thousands of players just kill these Albinorics over and over again. And it's just the perfect example of
I did it
gameplay
a couple of
matching
times.
lore. Anyway,
Why are the Albinorics in the City of Blood red? Are they just because they're like made of liquid and they're hanging around the blood so much that they're sort of infused with the blood? Also, did I see horns on the head of that guy?
with all of this terrible shit happening to Albinorics, frankly, just for the sheer audacity of them simply existing, it's no surprise that they see Miquella's Halig Tree as a haven. But in talking about that, we're getting far away from the Eternal Cities, so let's get back to there. So,
okay, well, that's fine. But Miquella's Halig Tree, or Miquella is, the Halig Tree is welcoming to everybody, and the Albinorics would be precisely the kind of being in the lands between that would probably seek out something, because they also, like, the Albinorics suck. They're, like, weird, they're made, they're slain by everybody, right? The Halig Tree would be the exact place that they would want to go to for safety, to feel welcome.
it appears the Eternal Cities weren't content with just birthing Silver Tears and Albinorics, because the Dragonkin, too, were born in the Eternal City. There are a tragic few that you can fight down there, and unlike the real stone dragons up above, they knew no true sky nor true lightning. It seems these Dragonkin were created, I think, with the intent of achieving a sort of immortality. Something that is suggested by the Dragon Scale Blade, which is an ice lightning weapon that reads, a weapon made by sharpening a gravel stone scale, thought to be the source of ancient dragon immortality, into an unclouded blade. Alas, the Dragonkin soldiers never attained immortality and perished as decrepit, pale imitations of their skyborn kin.
Oh, wow.
There's the word imitation again.
Yeah.
And interestingly, just like the Fingerslayer Blade is this hidden treasure of the Eternal City that is capable of harming the Greater Will, ancient dragon smithing stones too are a hidden treasure of Faram Azula, capable of creating weapons that can slay a god. So, like so many other things in this video, the Dragonkin almost seem like they are imitations.
Oh, look at that dragon on dragon.
With a malign purpose. But just like Renala's children and the first-gen Albinorics,
Blasphemous.
these imperfect births only led to withered legs and a pitiful existence.
Oh yeah, he couldn't walk. Yeah, interesting.
And now
Dragonkin
we finally
V1
arrive at the third city, the nameless Eternal City, which is located deep beneath the Erd Tree at the Deeproot depths.
I'm very interested to.
And it's lost its sky, its name,
on this
and
part,
even all traces of the Nox. And I believe we know exactly what is to blame for all of this.
Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. There's no Nox. There's no stars or fake stars or anything. That's why it didn't really feel like one of the Eternal Cities, because it just has nothing in common with the others other than it's underground.
Astel, bastard of the Void, is responsible.
Astel.
According to Astel's remembrance, it is a malformed star, born in the lightless void far away. And with all the force of a falling meteor, it seems, Astel destroyed an eternal city and took away their sky. Logically, this nameless eternal city is that eternal city he destroyed, since it's absolutely devastated and it is missing its false night sky. And when the description says Astel took away their sky, I believe that's really literal. I think Astel really did take it away, far away, because we don't fight Astel anywhere near the nameless eternal city.
Okay, so one question I've always had is why down here in the deep root depths in this city where there's like the old tree and the crucible knights there guarding it and stuff like that, if that is directly under the Erd tree. And so when I thought at one point, I did mention this also in a previous video, that maybe the Erd tree had replaced this tree, but then someone pointed out to me in the comments that it is the same, and that, you know, the Crucible Knights actually follow the Golden Order, and pointed that out to me, and then a few other examples, which kind of really changed my mind. I feel like it is one and the same. So I guess the explanation for that I'm seeing right now is that, what's his name? Astel shows up, crashes in, blows up the original tree, and takes the knight and goes and runs off. But there's still power here, and so the Erd tree continues to grow out of this crushed eternal city.
Far away, because we don't fight Astel anywhere near the nameless eternal city. We fight it way further south, almost as if Astel ruined the nameless city, then flowed all the way down the Ainsel River to the south.
Oh, the river does go straight down.
An enormous cavern.
It's a direct path.
Set up a suspiciously familiar night sky.
I always felt like Astel was kind of out of place in the whole game too. Like there is this, I mean, look at it. The only other thing that's kind of similar to Astel in my mind is like the falling star beasts, how they just like fall out of the sky and they're there and they do stuff. So it's just like, there's just random bits of like outer space magic or something in the game. And this was one of them. So I'm glad that there is some story behind this, because I just always thought this was out of place.
The Eternal Darkness spell tells us that it's this manifestation of the despair around the ruin of the Eternal City. And the spell in question is essentially this black hole with a powerful gravitational force drawing everything into it. The Astel don't seem like these super sentient beings to me, so what if they were mere animals, just drawn towards a sort of black hole, or maybe towards another powerful gravitational force, like a moon? Which brings us back to the city of Nokstella. Exploring Nokstella's tallest towers rewards you with the legendary Moon of Nokstella talisman, a treasure of theirs that represents the lost Black Moon. This moon apparently was once the guide of countless stars, and might have served as a sort of artificial moon below ground. But tragically, it seems this black moon was shattered into pieces, because fragments
is
of
this because of
moon can
Radahn?
be found in memory stones, which have a really similar gameplay function to the talisman, granting you additional memory slots. These stones are rightfully treasured by sorcerers, and above ground towers evoking those of the Eternal City would be built to protect these precious artifacts. I'm not sure how these fragments were stolen from the city, though over in Nokron there are examples of foreign forces making incursions.
Well, look at this guy right here. Like, he's your guard. Like, he's all that's protecting it. That guy.
Into the city. These beings are members of the Company of the Fallen Hawk, a company of slaves that were ordered to explore the Eternal City. Logically, these soldiers are slaves of the Golden Order, but who were the Fallen Hawks before their enslavement? Well, there's this one little theory that I quite like by user NoContribution15 on Reddit that suggests that these Fallen Hawks could have once been common soldiers of Stormvale Castle, because these soldiers once had hawk crest shields and even a Stormhawk king, dating back to ancient times, back when there was a true storm in Stormvale. And so, as the theory goes, the crest for this company became that of an inverted hawk, symbolizing their fall and perhaps referencing the inverted towers of the Eternal City.
You know, they could just turn the shield over.
that they were doomed to explore. As for why they explore the city, the first thing that comes to mind is that they might have been sent here to look for the Finger Slayer Blade, which is the hidden treasure of Nokron, where the Fallen Hawks were sent, although this is mostly all just speculation. Whatever the case, it really helps to characterize these
does
enemies
feel like
for
speculation.
you. Otherwise, the only other observation we can make is that many of the Fallen Hawks can be found digging hopelessly in the ground, hands bloodied by their long efforts to this day. Torches are an important part of their design, and this
Ghost flame.
reinforces the idea that they're here looking for something, to the point where the band's last embers were used up in their long search, and then they began to burn the bones of their fellows, acquiring the cold ghost flame. And with this new flame in hand, they became dwellers of the underground for all eternity. Like with the Fallen Hawks, there are some really open-ended parts to the stories of the Eternal Cities, some things that are curiosities to me, and I welcome you to try and answer them. For example, the giant thrones with the giant Nox skeletons on them, they're almost a complete mystery. I think.
Oh, man.
pla-
I was hoping he was going to go into these guys because when we got down there, I had no idea what that was, who they are. I never found any like description on any items that said anything about them. Now, I'm not necessarily like the best at in-game. Like, I didn't find every single item in the game when I went through it. You know, I'm not Vaati over here, but I had no idea what was going on. I was really hoping he was going to explain it. So I feel a little better about myself knowing that even he doesn't know.
place the game references these thrones are in the symbols for night sorceries and bubble sorceries as well. Beyond that, they're clearly a central part
bubble
of
sorcery
Nox
is weird.
culture, though we don't know what purpose these beings had. Below each one, though, you can loot Great Ghost Glovewort, which were given in tribute to those who died the most glorious of deaths, in the hope their stories would become legend. So it seems the Nox not only venerated these beings with giant thrones, but that their spirits as well were considered to be heroic, for their deaths were glorious. Another curiosity is the distorted bodies that are found in the Eternal Cities. These erupt from the ground, and many buildings as well, of the Nox. Are these other inhabitants of the city? Are their deaths related to the giants? What are these? And finally, there are the gargoyles that are found in the nameless Eternal Cities, with misshapen, ruined bodies.
Two faces.
None of these gargoyles have been
Cut open
mended,
like trolls.
but those that are mended
Missing,
are
they can't
mended with
walk.
black corpse wax, and they serve Malekith,
Oh,
the
cool.
Black Blade. Many of you will remember that two valiant gargoyles defend the path from Nokron to the Deeproot Depths, where the nameless Eternal City is. And interestingly, it's a coffin that takes you up there, suspended on a golden script. This golden script reminds me of the description of the Cipher Pater, which reads, "The furtive inscription appears to hang in the air, the language of light spoken by the two fingers." It makes sense that the two fingers would be aligned with these gargoyles that serve Malekith, and maybe some power of the two fingers is what takes you up to the nameless Eternal City in this coffin. Speaking of coffins, there's another coffin that you ride down from the Grand Cloister to Astel's lair, and there are a ton of coffins found in the Eternal Cities in general. Beyond being some absurd method of transport, perhaps sending remains along the river was some sort of burial rite? At any rate, many of these coffins have been waylaid along the Ainsel River tunnels, where ants feast upon the remains. And there's something fascinating going on with the...
But that's kind of like a shitty way to die. Like they send you off floating down the river, and it's supposed to be like, it's probably all like cool looking, and you float away, and everybody feels good. But in the end, you just get down to the end, and your coffin busts open, and some nasty ass ants just eat your corpse, and we're done.
The ants as well. A lot of these have these enormous abdomens.
That
These ants
booty,
in
though.
particular are based off honeypot ants, which essentially function in nature as these living sources of food storage for the colony. And the Elden Ring variant drop one of the most valuable runes in the Lands Between. They drop a Newman's rune, which makes a lot of sense because these ants are feasting upon corpses, and we did speculate earlier that Newman are indelibly tied to the Eternal Cities. I could speculate further, but
Yeah.
again, I'd welcome your thoughts on these curiosities.
As above, so
Exploring the
below
lands
and
between
beyond.
in the modern era,
Reimagine.
it's clear that the Eternal Cities have had this significant cultural impact upon many things that we find above ground. You can take the walking mausoleums, for example. These have really explicit Eternal City architecture, which is something
True.
that you can't help but notice when you see one of them wandering down
But they are
the
above
nameless
ground.
Eternal City. These mausoleums, it seems, were appropriated from the Eternal Cities to house the remains of soulless demigods of the Golden Order, something that suddenly became very necessary to do after Godwyn's death. And this tracks because the Eternal Cities do have a bit of a history with spirits. We mentioned earlier that they entomb their heroic spirits with legendary glovewort, but even the
right.
rebirth monuments above ground that you need to summon spirits look kind of like Eternal City constructs.
I could see that.
I speculate that these might have been
Oh, sick.
pioneered
Look at those
by the
eyes.
Nox, who, even if they didn't use these to summon spirits, they definitely might have used them to summon puppets, because puppetry is an invention of the Eternal Cities. To create a puppet of someone, you need them to drink a potion made of starlight shards, which are a prized item that was once used in the Eternal City as an ingredient in intoxicating drafts. Starlight shards are used for this because the stars command people's fates, and even the fates of the demigods, and so they can be used in potions given to create puppets with commanded fates. We know of 2 such puppets from the Eternal City, the Night Maiden and Swordstress puppets, who became puppets of their own volition.
I did not use
keen
these.
were they, it seems, to serve the Eternal Cities.
Look at their glowing
But
eyes.
when you look at all the puppet summons that you can get in Elden Ring, these 2, the Night Maiden and the Swordstress of the Nox, these 2 are a bit of a special case because most puppets we find are actually controlled against their will and are extremely unwilling to serve their masters. An excellent example of this are the puppets that are controlled by Celivis.
Yeah, but Celivis is a creep.
Who turn on him immediately when they're given the chance.
Oh, that's true.
These puppets are Knights of the Cuckoo, a faction that are explicitly aligned against Caria,
Solid name.
and yet these knights are forced to fight on Caria's behalf here in Caria all the same. Carians also seem to have appropriated a lot of the tools of the Eternal Cities, like puppetry and inverted towers as well, which is only natural considering how much they actually have in common with the Eternal Cities.
I don't see any inverted
Carians are
towers.
descended from astrologers, who also venerated the night sky. Another example of an invention
real night
of
sky.
the Eternal Cities that the Carians use is found at the Church of Vows, which features a Nox statue
Could the Nox be related to like the Carrion family or something like that? But they just a faction that got banished instead of like just staying above ground with like the school and the Carrion family and all that.
taken straight out of the Eternal Cities. Here at the church, Radagon famously repented his territorial aggressions and cleansed himself with celestial dew. Celestial dew is another draft of the Eternal Cities. It's called a night tear, which reverses all antagonizations and moves fate backwards, in a sense, to a time or a feeling before
Reverse
those
the stars.
antagonizations took place. And eventually, faraway descendants of the Eternal would finally be found above ground as well. This is in Celia, within Caelid. Gowry calls Celians descendants of the Eternal. And in addition to having one of those signature thrones at the center of the city,
yeah, there it is.
there's also a couple of
The
Nox
same as the
bosses
one with
here.
that giant
And
corpse.
finally, Celians were famed for their knight class of sorceries.
Okay, look, see, it's linking together. I'm really on it today. So there in Celia, you have these people that's wearing the garbs of the school. What's the name of the damn school where Renala is? But there's a clear path. Like they're all kind of related, right?
Which their assassins made good use of. The Celians were also really proficient at turning invisible, which is an art that the Black Knives used, since they are, after all, also scions of the Eternal Cities.
That's right.
And it's just amazing how it all overlaps.
Yeah.
In the end.
Yeah.
And in the end,
I agree with
another
that
group
statement.
would seek inroads to Nokron. This is when we play the game. These were Iji, Blythe, and Rani. Rani is a character that inherits a lot of the Nox's legacy. She becomes the final chapter in a story that they started to tell so long ago. prepare to cry, because I can't wait to cover her story properly, as it deserves.
Guys, thanks for joining me so much for that one. I really appreciate it. That was a really interesting one. I think I like that. Maybe not the most, but it was one of the best videos that I've seen from him. So I'm going to check the next one out soon. Join me then, and I will see you then. Thanks. Bye.